Okay, so I'm going to be focusing on qualitative graphing. And so all these graphs on the left are displacement versus time, displacement being x and time being t. My displacement is on my y-axis and my t is on my x-axis. And all these graphs on the right are going to be velocity times time, where my velocity is on my y-axis and the time is once again on my x-axis. And whenever you do a graph, time is always going to be on the x-axis, just as a reference for the future. So these graphs are numbered, like number 1 corresponds to number 1 over here, so they all kind of relate. So when I say graph number 1, I'm referring to both of these. When I say number 2, I'm referring to both of these. So to begin with graph number 1, with this one and this one, they both represent something that is not moving, meaning that there's no change in position. When you look at this x value is constant, that displacement is not changing. There's also zero velocity. I didn't redraw the line on here, but if I were to, it would just be a stagnant line all the way across at the zero value for velocity. And there's also zero acceleration because this velocity over here is not changing. Looking at graphs number 2, this one and this one, they both represent an object moving at a constant velocity in the positive direction. And what I mean by positive direction, it's kind of, you can choose which direction you want to be positive. I'm going to go with right being positive and left being negative. So the reason this is moving at a constant velocity in the positive direction is because this graph here represents a positive change in position because this displacement is steadily going up. It's not decreasing. And over here, this velocity is not changing, so it's going to have a constant velocity. And there's also going to be zero acceleration because that velocity is a constant. Looking at graphs number 3, those two, they're going to represent an object moving at a constant velocity in the negative direction. And the reason for that is this displacement is the opposite of this one. It's decreasing. So the displacement is decreasing. So in reference to what I labeled my positive and negative values, that would be like going from right to left. Technically you are decreasing in your displacement. Wait, no. Or that could, yeah, that would work too. Or going backwards, essentially. Decreasing your distance from a point. You still have a constant velocity here, although it is now in the negative realm. And once again, there is not going to be any acceleration because this velocity is a constant. Looking at graphs number 4, this one and this one here, they're both going to represent objects speeding up in the positive direction. Once again, the reason this is a positive direction is because this x value is increasing. And you can tell that this is speeding up because the differences between displacement over time are steadily getting bigger and bigger. It's a trend of exponential increase. And this velocity has an upward trend, meaning that it's accelerating positively, or the velocity is increasing over time. Looking at graphs number 5, this one and this one, they're both going to represent an object slowing down in the positive direction. And the reason for this is this displacement is leveling off. So it's increasing, but the leveling off symbolizes a lack of movement or a decrease in the amount of movement or a decrease in the velocity, which you can see over here is decreasing over time. So that's going to mean a negative acceleration or slowing down. Looking at graphs number 6, this one and this one, they're both going to represent an object slowing down in the negative direction. The reason is this is kind of an inverse of this one here. So instead of your displacement increasing like it is over here, it's steadily getting smaller. And your velocity appears to be increasing from a negative here. So it's almost like going backwards to not moving at all. So a decrease in negative velocity and a positive acceleration essentially for this. And then lastly, graphs number 7, this one and this one here, they're going to represent objects speeding up in the negative direction. So again, looking at exponential trends, this is kind of leveled off. this change in displacement is bigger here than it is here. Although it is negative, it is still a change in displacement, and this is still, like if this were like 4 and 5 seconds, this is still a much larger change in displacement than it is if you had 0 and 1, which is just this area over here. And based on that, you know that you have an increasing negative velocity because your velocity is changing, it's accelerating in the negative direction. Yeah, negatively accelerating, which is what causes this to experience this trend of exponential decrease in this sense, because it's displacement in the negative direction. So yeah, this is qualitative graphing, which is basically what you can deduct from looking at graphs. You don't necessarily need numbers, it's more conceptual, and it's kind of a reference thing that will be helpful later.